Okay, hey, hello, hi, we are back in the corner, this time standing. I know that we just had, it seems like, Independent Bookstore Day at, well, I guess it was the end of April now, so it was a few months ago. But today is Romance Bookstore Day, and we have talked pretty extensively over the last couple of years about the rise in romance in the sense that romance has always been popular. It has always been a money driver to bookstores, but especially with indie bookstores, it has also been kind of difficult to find romance in store until the last couple of years, and we've really seen a boom of stocking romance in bookstores. I have personally anecdotally seen at least a couple of my own bookstores get romance sections for the first time in the last couple of years. Now, we've also talked about what these romance sections are looking like and the fact that we are mostly seeing trade paperbacks. We have kind of seen mass markets phased out. We saw a quick blip of an attempt to launch the new format of Mass Max, which I actually really enjoyed, but that they cut off very quickly before I think it even had a chance to perform in the market, because I don't think most people even knew it existed. And now we've got some series that aren't going to match in terms of Mass Max versus mass market. I have at least one Sarah McLean title like that, and we have the new Sarah McLean title coming out on Tuesday, so we're just missing Romance Bookstore Day. Additionally, in Chicago, of interest for romance readers but missing Romance Bookstore Day, we are getting a romance-focused bookstore. Now, these have been on the rise. In the suburbs, we have Love Sweet Arrow. As someone without a car, I can't get there easily. Of course, we've seen The Ripped Bodice out west, and now in New York. So unfortunately, just missing Romance Bookstore Day. We will be seeing the last chapter open on September 2nd. I believe it's going to be pretty close to Roscoe Books if you're in Chicago, which is great news for me, and I am excited about that. So the plan for today is to hit up a couple of stores. I'm planning on hitting up Women and Children First, which I also hit up last year for Romance Bookstore Day and did a haul from. And I also plan to hit up Unabridged, both because they will be convenient in the sense that I should be able to just hop on a bus. I mean, if you're in Chicago, you know the 22 on a weekend, the 22 anytime really, is kind of putting your fate in the CTA's hands, which right now, who knows, but we'll see. But additionally to both of those stores having pretty robust romance sections, they also are participating in Romance Bookstore Day according to the Romance Bookstore Day website. Now, their deals, I believe, are 10% off in store on romances. As someone who completed Independent Bookstore Day and went to 15 stores, I get 15% off at participating stores, both of which are participating, so I will probably be using that deal instead, but I want to support the stores that are participating. Now, both stores have posted on Instagram in preparation for today, and the post from Unabridged, I'm not gonna lie, looking at the book stack that they posted, it makes sense. It's what's popular. We've got a couple of Emily Henry titles in there. We've got a Colleen Hoover, which I admittedly have never read, and as I mentioned, I really don't have plans to read, but I also respect that it's gotten a lot of people back into reading. But then they also had Daisy Jones in the 6 in the stack, and it just feels like it's a different kind of reader we're reaching out to here. One, Daisy Jones in the 6 is not a romance. Full stop. But otherwise, these feel like romances with crossover appeal, or it's just not the romance I came up on, which is absolutely fine. But I've talked a bit before, especially with this move into trade, about how as a long-term romance reader, it feels like the genre and the focus is shifting, and my odds of being able to walk into a store and grab like Elisa Kleypas, who is a giant in romance, is not very high, but we will see. So my plans today are to hit up a couple of stores. I'm also gonna try and stop by the stationery store that I went to last weekend because I need a protective cover for the journal I bought from them as a reading journal. And yeah, we'll see. So we're gonna go buy some books. I may take you along in some capacity in terms of kind of browsing sections. We will see. But I, of course, will be reporting back with the haul, and we will see what we get. I've also started listening to The Duchess Effect by Tracy Livesay on Libby. I plan to listen to this on my walk. I am very nervous based on the reviews I've been seeing from people I trust about this one, because one, it's already a sequel to a romance, but two, I have been reading in some of the reviews that a lot of the conflict in this one revolves around keeping a secret just for the sake of the conflict. I have some ideas about what that could potentially be, but I don't really like that idea. I don't know. We'll see. All right, I'm sweaty, but I'm back, and to be completely honest, that went about as well as I thought, right down to the behavior of the 22 bus. It was like 30 minutes away when I got to my bus stop when going to Women and Children First, because I decided to do Women and Children first, and so I decided I would just walk it. I did not anticipate or not properly acknowledge what the heat was today. I did, by some miracle, remember that I can, in fact, wear a hat to protect my scalp, so I wore a hat there. But then when I took it off, because I'm not a hat person, I realized I was very sweaty on my head, and here we are today. So then, just to kind of round up all the CTA shenanigans at once before we dive into the books and the feel of the day and all of that, I waited a half an hour for a southbound bus and watched 4 northbound buses pass in that time, because my thing with the 22, or what inevitably always happens to me with the 22, is it is always running plentiful in the direction opposite of the way I personally need to be going at any given time. So I waited a half an hour for the bus rather than walk like 2.5, almost 3 miles to the next bookstore unabridged, and finally got on the bus, and then it was crowded because it was the only bus that had run for a half an hour. And so I finally worked my way to the back, and there was one back corner seat available, and I should have known, based on it being empty on a crowded bus, that there was something wrong with that seat. But I was frustrated because people weren't moving in, and it was a crowded bus, and you know, the whole shebang. So finally I work my way up to the back of the bus and am able to maneuver in that seat to kind of just clear some congestion. So I sit down, and of course, the minute I sit down, the seat feels wet. But luckily not the kind of wet you would initially be concerned about on the CTA, and instead the bus was basically dripping on me. There was like condensation on the top of the bus, and it was basically like dripping on me the rest of the way. And then I got kind of frazzled, got off the bus way too early, walked in the heat more than I needed to. Additionally, while waiting for the bus for a half an hour, there were planes going overhead. I did try to get a nice formation video of some of the planes from the Air and Water Show for you, but of course I didn't manage to do that. So by the time I then get on the train to come home, one, I'm dehydrated. I've probably miscalculated a lot today. I have not been drinking enough liquids, and tomorrow, me and my friends are going to the Ren Fair, and it is supposed to be like 90 degrees. So we will see how that goes. I will drink a lot of liquids the rest of today through tomorrow morning. But anyway, then I finally get on a train, and again, people are not scooching in. You just need to scooch in. I was like basically backed against the door getting on at Belmont, and it was frustrating because there was definitely room. There was like that bottleneck right before the main part of the train car that is still the part that's considered the door part of the car that everyone is just crammed in, and I couldn't get around people because I was trapped against the door to move in. But luckily at the next stop I was able to scooch in. So that's enough of my public transit tangent, but just scooch in to the middle of the car or scooch into the bus or whatever you need to do so people aren't like crammed right in an entryway. But anyway, so I got to the bookstore, and I'm not gonna lie, today was kind of lackluster for me, a little disappointing. Part of it was that I was going by myself. All of my friends are busy, some of them because we're going to the Ren Fair tomorrow and they are being much smarter about their time management and actually taking care of chores. But today very much felt like a holiday where we'll take your money and that's about it, which, to be fair, bookstores are very much overworked, and they did have discounts in place, but there just wasn't the era of frivolity, I guess. It felt like a normal Saturday in the store. While romance may have had more displays, or there may have been a sign for Romance Bookstore Day, it just felt kind of incidental, and the sections themselves basically felt like I anticipated they would, and I'm not gonna lie, I'm a little discouraged, I'm a little bummed, and not with what I got, because I did walk away with a lot of books, and a lot of books I'm excited to read, but I very much was aware and acknowledged that I kind of was buying just to buy, because most of these books, or most of the books I want to read, I can either get from the library or I can get on Kobo when they go on sale, because romances go on sale generally about 6 months out from release. You can get them for under $5 on Kobo or your e-reader of choice. And I've read a lot of Twitter threads about this from Jen Prokop from Fated Mates, this idea that consumers kind of have to do what's best for them. And right now we've got these romance sections in these indie bookstores that are like $16, $17 trade paperbacks, and that is just not sustainable for me as a reader. It goes back where I felt like I was was going back to when I was a teenager and I read Meg Cabot voraciously. She was my most read author for a long time. I don't know if she still is, but I read her all the time. And I had maybe 1 or 2 Meg Cabot books in my personal collection. And those were the first 2 Princess Diary books that I got for like, what, my 11th birthday maybe? And that was because my mom purchased those for me for my birthday. But I read Meg Cabot books so quickly, I had limited opportunities to buy new books. And because of that, I really worked to make my book buying budget stretch as far as possible. And I would judge what I was buying by how long it was. So I would try and find the longest thing I was interested. More after you stopped seeing as many young adult books premiere in paperback or have mass market paperbacks, but that's how I approached my book buying for a long time. And within the last couple of years, I luckily had been a little bit more comfortable in terms of making money, and I wanted to support authors and I wanted to support bookstores. And so I was buying a lot more. And I have been excited, like I said, to see these romance sections expand in bookstores. But like today, I was hoping to pick up like the rest of the Eloisa James Wallflowers series. I have the first one that I pre-ordered, which I shamefully haven't read yet, but I was hoping to pick up the rest of the series. Didn't see any Eloisa James today. I didn't see any Joanna Shupe. I saw like one-offs of Sarah MacLean and Tessa Dare at Women and Children First on their mass market spinner. I remember when that spinner went in, I think I've talked to you about it here before, how excited I was to see that mass market spinner, and it is a very sad spinner. It is very rarely replenished. I did manage to find a new title on it today, and I did buy that title because I did want to, and I have been trying very consciously to spend my money on mass markets if I'm interested in them and I see them. So there is that buying history, there is that purchasing power, but so often those titles are not new. They're backlist, they're things I've already read. And as a romance reader, even though I never feel as voracious as others or as I could be or should be, I've read those. And I'm not saying don't carry backlist, because I absolutely would have picked up some Lisa Kleypas backlist today, because I'm working through some of that backlist when I can, because, well, mostly because there's no new book this year, or at least that I've seen. However, a lot of these books are like one-offs in series. Even the one I bought today is a one-off from a series, and it's the end of a series, I believe, and I haven't read any of the others, which I will be fine. I will manage, and I will tell you about that book. But I was just kind of bummed, especially because the titles you're most frequently going to see in mass market are historical romances, and I very much gravitate toward historical romances. I'm not saying historical romances only exist in mass market, but I would argue that there are differences in tone sometimes between the mass market historical romances and the trade paperback historical romances. I will say I was a little annoyed because I'm pretty sure I overheard a guy like making fun of like the stock images or the covers, presumably based on the context of where we were on the mass market romances. I think that they were back in that corner looking at either the mysteries or the sci-fi fantasy, because they're all in the same kind of space. It makes sense, those are all the genres, but it was a little bit like, on Romance Bookstore Day, how dare you? However, how would they know it's Romance Bookstore Day? Because there wasn't really a hullabaloo about it. So do I remember where I was going with this? Not completely, but you can't always tell with the covers, but at the same time, the cartoon covers feel like they are trying to be a little bit more comical, and the pacing isn't always the same. I recognize, have really gotten used to Avon structuring to a lot of things as well, but I just didn't have a huge selection of a historical romance. Like I said, they were there, but the authors that I would consider bread and butter of romance were not, and even Bridgerton only existed in trade paperback. And I know we've talked before about how trade paperbacks are easier to return, so that does make sense, and that does make sense why these sections are being curated this way as well. But we are seeing historical romance move into trade paperback slower than other subgenres of romance. And because of that, I had less historical romance to pick from today. And even romances that came out in trade paperback, to my knowledge, I couldn't find. Like, I wanted to buy Aphrodite and the Duke and Verity and the Forbidden Suitor is that the name of the second one today? But I didn't see them at either store. And so it did make me think about the purchasing power of romance and where consumers are spending money, the way that romance really seems to be catering to the new generation of romance right now. And that's neither here nor there. But I found myself really bummed because I didn't feel like I was the romance reader that either these stores or the publishers right now are interested in, and I have been reading romance since I was a teenager. I love romance, but admittedly to my own tastes as a reader, some of the romances that are being really marketed as rom-coms right now don't necessarily work for me. They don't necessarily feel funny or romantic, and I'm much more likely to take a chance on a book financially if it's sitting around that like $10, $11 mark. Now, I know paper prices have gone up. I know that that means that the cost of books is going to go up. And I know that that translates to mass market as it would for any other form. You know, not that I've really seen a mass market lately to be able to compare. That's a lie. I have a mass market right here. It was $9, which is actually a lot less than I would have anticipated. And it is a traditional mass market, not a mass max, as discussed. But I was looking at these other trade paperbacks today and realizing that they were running $16, $17 a pop. And while I've been seeing the concept of girl math trending on TikTok lately, and to be fair, I understand the gist, but not the heart of that, I looked at those prices and was like, basically that's $20. And that's really hard to justify as a consumer. I have been really good this year about not spending superfluously on books. And that's a delicate balance because I'm still supporting my local businesses, I'm supporting bookstores, I'm supporting authors, so I don't feel it is a waste. But I was unemployed for part of the year. I've got library books piling up. I don't technically need these books. And I've been stocking up on romances when they go on sale on Kobo. And because I have my Kobo account linked to the bookseller in Lincoln Square, don't ask me how to do it. I did it through their website. Check it out if you want. I am still technically supporting local when I buy Kobo. Now granted, they're maybe getting a penny from that, but they're getting something in theory, or I've tried. But I don't know. I definitely feel like I spent just to spend today. And I'm not saying that to say I'm not looking forward to these books. And I'm not saying that to say that I don't love these authors. Most of these authors that I purchased today were sure things for me in the sense that I have read and enjoyed previous work. I did buy 2 books, or find 2 books I was already planning on buying or hoping to buy at Women and Children First. I saw another book at Women and Children First that I was kind of on the fence about whether I should buy it, leaning toward buying it, but it was a gay romance, so I ended up buying it at Unabridged. Now, both Women and Children First and Unabridged are LGBTQIA+ friendly, so that wasn't necessarily an issue, but I decided I wanted to buy it at Unabridged. Now, something to know, if you are book shopping in Chicago and you're in the romance section at Unabridged and you're like, this is a queer bookstore, all of these romances are very straight, what's going on? That's because their queer romances are in another section. But that being said, let's dive into what I did pick up today, because again, I am not taking away from my excitement about what I did pick up, but rather I just didn't really feel fully reflected for my romance reading profile as a reader, as a shopper, and as indicated earlier today, I kind of anticipated that based on some of the book stacks that were getting put on Instagram and whatever. It just is what it is, I guess, but as someone who doesn't have a Barnes & Noble in the city proper, I mean, I think there is still the one on State Street that's technically a college bookstore, but does have a pretty robust fiction and other sections, I guess, technically, but the romance sections are much different in the city than you would expect. You would expect you could get your hands on just about anything, but not really the case. Luckily, I have pre-ordered on Kobo already prior to today, Sarah McLean's new book. Part of me secretly hoped that Unabridged would have it and they would have it out early, because sometimes they put things out early, and then I'd just be able to grab it today and then I'd have both copies, but alas, that was not the case. So, moving on, let's talk about what I grabbed at Women and Children First, starting with the surprise grab and the one newish mass market I found on the spinner, The Duchess Takes a Husband by Harper St. George. I say newish, but I did check the copyright just kind of because I was curious on what was getting replenished on the spinner, what they were carrying on the spinner. I know that there are certain titles that they are replenishing on the spinner because they had the first of the Spindle Cove books and they had 2 copies. And I purchased my copy of the first Spindle Cove book there last Independent Bookstore Day, like not this most recent one, but the one before that, because I read it this spring. But they don't have any of the other Spindle Cove books. That also just is frustrating. But to be fair, or maybe to rescind a previous statement, I may have said they only had like 1 off for Tessa Dare, but I think they had 2 1-offs for Tessa Dare. So there you go. You can get 2 Tessa Dares, but not from the same series. But this is from Berkeley. It is the Gilded Age Heiresses series. I do really enjoy the Gilded Age in Joanna Shoup, so I am excited to see it from another author. However, I do think this is set in England, and it involves a duchess who I believe had been an American heiress and was widowed, and she's still kind of a pariah, but she's got that money. And she hooks up with the illegitimate child of an earl who is involved in a club. I assume there might be a club at the center of this, so I probably, if I like this, will need to get my hands on the rest of the series. Because I enjoy a club, I enjoy a gaming hell, this has been established. So she teams up with him and promises him the funds to start his own establishment if he can manage to show her pleasure. So we will see. Just gonna take a wild stab in the dark and bet he can. And then I have Tastes Like Shaker by Nisha Sharma. This is the sequel to Dating Dr. Dill. We mentioned this in the August Anticipated. We've obviously talked about Dating Dr. Dill before. Maybe not obviously. If you want to hear me talk about that, I talked about it. But this is a Much Ado About Nothing retelling following Bobby and Bunty, who were introduced as friends of Karina and Prim in book 1, and they are helping throw Karina and Prim's wedding. So we're going to get to see the wedding, which makes sense for a Much Ado retelling. So I'm very excited about this one. Seems like it's going to be a lot of fun. Also excited because I wasn't seeing it listed in the physical collection at Chicago Library yet. I was seeing it in the Libby collection, but this way I have my hands on it. Flipping through it quickly, I did not see a Taylor Swift playlist like in Dating Dr. Dill, which is fine because different characters are going to have different musical tastes. However, I did see on TikTok that Nisha Sharma was able to go to the Eras Tour, and that made me happy based on Taylor Swift's presence in Dating Dr. Dill. And then I pulled a I am nearing the top of the list of the hold list at the library, but I'm just going to cancel it and buy my own copy. Not the smartest financial decision. I'm not recommending it, but it's not my first time doing it either. Business or Pleasure by Rachel Lynn Solomon. Now, not even my first time this year. I did it with the Brandon Taylor. You know what? We're not going to think about it too hard. Anyway, this is the newest from the author of The X Talk and Weather Girl, both of which I really enjoyed. So I was excited to grab this one. It's following a ghostwriter who has a potentially not that great one-night stand at a convention, only to find out that her one-night stand ends up being a future client and the complications that arise from that. In terms of contemporary romances that are billed as rom-coms and hit for me, both of these authors have accomplished that with previous work, so I am pretty confident that I'm going to enjoy these. I'm optimistic I'm going to enjoy these because of that, and I'm excited to dive in. And then I trekked on over to Unabridged before my 30-minute bus wait minimum. I did hit up the stationery store and managed to get a cover for my notebook. Thank goodness, I almost forgot because I was distracted because on the walk up, I realized a Macron store that I had been waiting to open had opened. And so I was like, I have to get some on the way over to Unabridged, which I did. They were delicious, so I cannot show them to you, but I almost forgot to go get my journal cover because of that. I did not forget. I succeeded in both tasks and then waited for the bus for 30 minutes. But when I got to Unabridged and was absolutely sweaty and disgusting, I was able to browse around. It has a wonderful selection in terms of everything. So I was very focused. I had to stay very focused because I was going to get distracted by everything else. They have so many books there. And one of the first things I grabbed was The Secret Lives of Country Gentlemen by KJ Charles. I talked about this earlier this year in terms of upcoming books for one of the months. So it involves a romance that involves smugglers. I believe at the time I either verbally compared it to or mentally compared it to. One or the other. One of those you would have heard me say it, and one of those you wouldn't have, to Make It End by Daphne du Maurier, but I do not know. I admittedly anticipate it ending differently than a Daphne du Maurier, but who knows, maybe we're gonna have to have that HEA conversation sooner than we thought. Now, I contemplated buying Court of the Vampire Queen by Katie Roberts, but ultimately put it on hold at the library. Does that count as saving money? Either way, I still bought 2 more books, one of which is an Adriana Herrera contemporary, On the Hustle. I have been meaning to read her contemporaries even before I loved or fell in love with her historicals, so figured I should probably get on that, and I grabbed this one. It involves a woman who has a potentially contentious relationship with her boss. Maybe there's some tension of different kinds there, and she moves to Dallas, and then he follows her and propositions that they work together on a home improvement reality television show. So it seems like there could be a lot of fun here, and I'm very interested to see how Herrera's voice works in contemporary, because based on how it operates in historical, I think it's going to be very fast-paced, a lot of fun. I'm very excited to see it. If I play my cards correctly, I will prioritize this and get it read so I can pass it off to one of my book club members at Printers Row Lit Fest. Odds are not great, but I have the best of intentions. It could also be influenced by who is coming to Printers Row Lit Fest, because gosh knows we don't have the schedule yet. What's reading in preparation? It's fine. Don't worry about it. Anyway, I bought 1 more book. This was one that I had checked out from the library last year, didn't get around to in time, and then I impulse purchased it today, and that is Witchful Thinking by Celestine Martin. It seemed fitting because we're going to be entering spooky times, and what better reading for spooky times than witchy books? And this follows a protagonist who has a wish that turns into a spell that means she can't say no, but not, I would assume, in ways that really make consent uncomfortable, but in ways that force her to help her former high school crush unhex his house and the forced proximity of that. So excited to read this one. I think it's going to be a lot of fun. I've heard good things. And the second book either already came out or we will be talking about it upcoming very soon. So that was what I grabbed today, and I guess maybe in some ways it was fine that the selection felt a little lackluster for me in some ways, because even with a selection that was admittedly kind of lackluster for me, I still walked out easy with 6 books and left plenty behind. But like I said, did I really need to buy any of these books? I don't know. Maybe the day would have been a little bit more fun if I was with other people. Maybe it would have been a little bit more fun if there was just a little bit more pizzazz about the whole thing. I don't know, but honestly, it felt like a normal Saturday book shopping to me. I'm not gonna lie to you. And while the 10% off is a great incentive, one, I personally already had the 15. That does not negate that most people don't. And also the margins for profits on books is basically non-existent. So one, I don't even know how all of these stores can give me the 15% off all year. I'm not gonna question it because it works great for me and I shop local, but the 10% is a huge boon. However, when the books are $16, $17 a pop right now, it isn't as big of a savings as it would be on mass markets. Like, you could load up. But again, I know the returns look different there. It's a complicated scenario, which is why I think the pizzazz would go a long way, but that's just me. I am very interested to see the opening of the Romance Bookstore in Chicago in the next couple of weeks, and I will definitely be reporting back on that. I am very excited to see their selection, to see potentially more subgenres built out more extensively, whether that be historical romance, whether that be romantic suspense, whether that be paranormal romance, whatever the case may be. So I'm definitely going to keep my eye out on that. And like I said, we will see and report back. But for now, I am very interested to hear if you partook in Romance Bookstore Day, what you grabbed, if you did, if your bookstore was doing anything special. I know that there are some bookstores that I would have loved to hit up that have some really robust secondhand romance sections, and that's where you can potentially find a lot of gold. But those can also be deceptive because there is a curation involved in that, at least I would assume. Anyway, I guess I'm just interested to hear how this admittedly made up holiday of sorts is being embraced by different stores, how it's being implemented by different stores, what some of the fun things every store is doing are. I know a lot of stores are doing like blind date with books. I love that idea. I brought it into our store. It didn't do as well in our store when I was a bookseller. As a consumer, I am less likely to take a risk on it just because what if I've already read the book? You never know, but I love the idea of it and I love seeing other people partake, so I know that that's one thing some stores are doing. Let me know what yours did. Let me know what you picked up, what you were excited for, and what you're excited to dive into in terms of romance next. But as always, thanks for hanging out. Like and subscribe as you're feeling. Read something good, and yeah, bye.